I have been secretly married to Ethan for 3 years, and I am 8 months pregnant. He said he wanted to give me a special wedding. I stood on stage with great anticipation. But it was his assistant who walked over. She threw a bright red marriage certificate in my face and accused me, saying, "Sophia, do you think you can replace me just because you're pregnant? This must be a joke. Didn't your parents say they value marriage highly? How could they raise such a daughter?" Ethan stood behind her. His cold gaze pained me. And later I understood. He got married to his assistant the day before our wedding, all to take revenge on his deceased childhood sweetheart and her mother. That night, my mother couldn't take the online attacks and had a heart attack, passing away, while my father became a vegetable after an accident. He personally reported me for plagiarism, resulting in my graduate status and university degree being revoked. I was unsurprisingly labeled as the other woman, and my child was called an illegitimate child. 5 years later, I saw Ethan again, and he said he wanted to give me and the child a home. Sophia, her voice felt like it was dragging me back into a nightmare in the dead of night. Leaving me completely frozen, I turned around and saw Ethan's surprised expression. He was wearing a suit, looking exactly like the indifferent groom I remembered. Over the past 5 years, I imagined many scenarios of our reunion, but I never expected to meet in a place like this, in such a role. I once thought I would be furious when we met again. But my heart felt completely calm. "Excuse me, I'd like to get by." I turned sideways to pass him, but he reached out to stop me. The teasing voices from the private room in the club broke the silence between us. What does it matter that I couldn't win over the lofty Isabella back then? Oh, she was as noble as a saint. Her spoiled daughter could only kneel on the ground begging for my attention. And I have to thank you, old Jew. I heard Isabella left because of her temperamental daughter. If it weren't for you looking after her, who knows where she would be living now? Isabella is my mother. The one speaking with such self-satisfaction is my sponsor, Christopher, who once pursued my mother. For him, the most boastful thing is that the daughter of his former goddess has now become his lover. I pretended not to notice Christopher's smugness as he spoke, reaching for the doorknob intending to go in. But Ethan suddenly pulled me behind him and swung the door open forcefully. "What are you all chatting about that's so enjoyable?" No one noticed me behind him. After a brief smile, the lively atmosphere resumed. Christopher slowly stood up, wearing a teasing expression, and asked Ethan if he was also interested in my little lover. Let's give everyone an eye-opener at that moment. Her price is really not high. Only $150,000 a year, and you can enjoy her freely every day, ensuring a different experience each day. She can be considered quite a unique presence. Everyone burst into laughter, praising Christopher for still being energetic and a wise mentor. Seeing the topic about to change, I freed myself from Ethan's grasp, smiling as I walked over to Christopher and skillfully steadied him. "Didn't the doctor tell you to drink less?" The private room suddenly fell silent. Dozens of eyes were focused on me like searchlights, especially Ethan's gaze. Which felt the hottest? Christopher woke up from his drunken state, realizing that I heard everything he just said, but he didn't feel ashamed instead. In front of everyone, he pinched my chest a few times and still had the nerve to control me. He turned to everyone and proudly announced, "This is Isabella's precious daughter that I told you about." Back then, I spent 3 years pursuing her mother without success, but it took only 3 seconds to pursue her. Christopher's hand touched my back, making me feel a bit uncomfortable. I maintained a smile, allowing him to show off his achievements in front of everyone. These embarrassing moments are nothing compared to my father's medical expenses and my son's surgery costs. I gently wiped the wine stain from the corner of his mouth with my sleeve and smiled, saying, "The doctor told you to quit drinking. You should think of me." The gentle light in my eyes made him give up the idea of publicly humiliating me. He poured 3 glasses of wine for me without a care. "Why are you still not here?" "I've already given you a quarter of an hour. Hurry and apologize to the CEOs, otherwise, your leave request for tonight will be useless." If I hadn't run into Ethan at the door, I wouldn't have been late. From putting my son to sleep to rushing over despite a high fever, I feel like I haven't put in much effort, even though Christopher is almost 50. He needs to be fussed over to fall asleep, unless I'm sick. However, today I took a day off, and he made some demands. If I don't manage to calm him down, I'll definitely be sleepless tonight. I ignored Ethan's deep gaze, lifted the 3 glasses of liquor in front of me, and downed them in one go. After 3 glasses, my stomach felt uncomfortable. The high fever made me feel very unwell, my throat hurt badly, and my vision blurred. Sorry, I need to go to the restroom. I turned and stumbled into the restroom, starting to vomit. The alcohol and stomach acid burned my throat, and tears couldn't stop flowing. I tightly gripped the edge of the sink. Looking at myself in the mirror, pale face, lips uncomfortably red from the fever, and strands of hair stuck to my face from the cold sweat. It really doesn't look good. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to wake myself up a bit. You know, my mom hates mistresses the most. I never expected you to fall to this level and become one. A cold voice came from behind me, and I saw Ethan's sarcastic gaze in the mirror. He leaned against the door, dressed in a neat suit, his expression blank, as if he were watching an interesting play. I slightly tugged at the corner of my mouth but didn't respond, continuing to lower my head and rinse my mouth. Seeing that I was silent, he walked over with a cold smile and asked, "What's wrong? Lost your voice? Isn't this exactly what you wanted? I'll tell him whatever he wants to hear." I no longer have the same confidence I used to have. Ethan's gaze suddenly became very heavy, with a hint of surprise, seeing those cold eyes, the wedding from 5 years ago, which felt like a nightmare, resurfaced in my mind. My assistant Emma threw the marriage certificate in my face, calling me a mistress while the audience pointed and whispered. My mom fainted on the spot, my dad slapped me, and Ethan stood in the crowd, watching everything coldly. He was very angry with me, because he believes it was my mother who caused the suffering of his childhood friend and her mother. However, in reality, it was Olivia's mother who intervened in someone else's marriage, becoming the mistress and taking away the original spouse's assets. My mother, as a lawyer, helped the original spouse win the lawsuit and get back what she deserved. Olivia's mother didn't want to give up. She took her daughter and threatened to jump off a building, trying to make that irresponsible boy change his mind. In the end, they both fell and lost their lives. Ethan doesn't believe any of this and cannot accept the truth. He insists that it was his mother who forced them to death. So he carefully approached me, tricked me into hiding the marriage, and then publicly humiliated me at the wedding, causing my whole family to be affected. Sophia, how did your mother teach you? Christopher could be your father. How could you be willing to be his mistress? He looked at me with eyes full of sarcasm. The death of my mother is a pain that I can never let go of. It feels as if my heart is tightly gripped. I bite my lip, struggling to hold back tears. The mother who has always been proud and hated mistresses is now being criticized for her poor parenting, feeling that she raised someone unworthy. I took a deep breath, suppressed my grievances, and replied with a light laugh. Yeah, I'm the one who doesn't know what's good for me. Otherwise, how would I have believed your words and been your mistress for 3 years? Ethan's expression became serious, and just as he was about to say something, I suddenly felt weak and almost fell. He instinctively reached out to support me, his palm touching my burning skin, and his expression immediately changed. "You have a fever." I pushed him away, barely steadying myself. "This is none of your business." But he insisted on holding on to me, wanting to take me to the hospital. I struggled desperately, but I couldn't escape his iron grip on my hand. Let go. "Christopher is still waiting for me. I don't have time to bicker with you." A flicker of anger flashed in Ethan's eyes, and just as he was about to erupt, the bathroom door was suddenly pushed open. "Hey, Ethan, are you interested in my little lover?" Christopher, slightly drunk, leaned against the door frame, his gaze shifting back and forth between me and Ethan, grinning amusingly. Ethan shot him a cold glance, not letting go because she has a fever. Christopher sneered and said, "My beloved woman, it's not your place to worry." He walked over and pulled me into his arms, expressing his possessiveness. "Let's go, back to drinking." I suppressed my discomfort and followed him honestly. But Ethan suddenly said, "Christopher, is this how you treat the daughter of your former beloved? Is this love?" I felt a bit dizzy and didn't immediately understand what Ethan was trying to express. He caused my mother's death and ruined my family, and now he shows me sympathy. Christopher squinted, his tone not very pleasant. "Ethan, saying that doesn't make any sense." "Does it?" Ethan ignored him and directly pulled me into his embrace. "She's like this, and you still let her drink, Christopher. It's all fun and games. But if something goes wrong, it could be troublesome." Christopher's expression changed slightly, clearly noticing that I wasn't feeling well. He quickly chuckled and said, "Are you feeling sorry for her? Ethan, you didn't care for her back then." Ethan didn't respond and directly pulled me outside. I struggled, but he picked me up horizontally. Christopher kept saying something from the back, but Ethan completely ignored him. I felt a rush of heat, lacking the strength to struggle, and could only let him push me into the car. Taking advantage of Ethan's distraction, Christopher got into the car, sat in the passenger seat, and coldly asked, "Ethan, where do you plan to take my woman?" Ethan didn't pay attention to his deliberately provocative tone and replied casually, "If she becomes unstable, you won't be able to handle it." Christopher snorted coldly and then fell silent. The car drove through the night, and it was very quiet inside. Suddenly, Ethan asked me, "Where is the child buried? I want to go see him." I felt a tightness in my chest, my nails digging deeply into my palm. He thought the little treasure was already gone. 5 years ago, something happened at the wedding. I actually gave birth to a boy long ago. But Ethan never thought to see him. Later, he messed everything up, and I left with my son who had congenital heart disease. Everyone thought the child was already gone. I also didn't want Ethan to know that the little treasure was still alive. No need to. He doesn't deserve to have a father like you. More accurately, someone like Ethan doesn't deserve to be the father of my child. If it weren't for the premature birth, the severity of the little one's heart disease might not have been so serious. Ethan slammed on the brakes, gripping the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles turning white. Christopher almost hit his head, chuckling coldly, "Ethan, everyone else is gone. What are you pretending to be so familial for?" Ethan ignored him, got out of the car, yanked Christopher down forcefully, tossed him onto the ground, and then left. Only Ethan and I were left in the car. The shadows of the trees quickly receded, and the air seemed to grow heavy, but soon we arrived at the hospital. After seeing the doctor, I didn't wait for him to get the medicine. I just walked out of the hospital and hailed a taxi. As the ride-hailing car arrived, he slammed the door shut and drove the driver away. "Why are you in such a hurry to go back and take care of him?" "Sophia, how low do you intend to go? I don't even know how much worse I can get. All I know is that on the day of the wedding, my life fell into complete darkness. As an unwanted mistress, I have no education and can't find a job that can support myself. The money my parents saved up was almost spent within a year. I've sold everything that can be sold, yet I still can't come up with that much medical expense. I once considered ending it all with my dad and son, at a critical moment." Christopher noticed my despair and offered to take care of me. He said, "There is hope only if you are alive." Actually, I have little hope for the future. But I can't just give up on my child who is related to me by blood. Because of me, my dad shouldn't lose the chance to live either, to pay for their medical expenses. I hesitated only for a moment before agreeing to be Christopher's mistress. I looked up at Ethan, smiling slightly. Did he already know about all this? I've always been this kind of person. I liked Ethan before, but it only brought me a lot of suffering. Later, I was willing to be the other woman, which led to tragedy. I feel the cost was very high. Even though Christopher always loves to talk, he hasn't missed a single payment. For that, I am still very grateful to him. As for what he wants from me, I'm no longer very concerned. The torment of those days and nights felt like self-punishment. I thought of it as atonement. Even Christopher laughed at me, saying that Mom might turn over in anger because of me. Sometimes I even wonder, if I were a little more worthless, could Mom really come back to life? Dad will definitely wake up. He won't just lie in bed as if he never lived. After the wedding, the series of revenge tactics left our family in shock. If it weren't for the sudden heart attack, Mom could have proven my innocence, but life has no ifs. Ethan looked calm on the surface, but inside he had a lot of emotions. In the end, he coldly let go of my hand and told me to get lost. I turned around and got into a taxi to go home. When I entered the room, I saw that the baby was flushed, breathing rapidly, and his body was hot, which worried me. "Mom, I feel really unwell." I trembled as I picked up the baby, trying to comfort him while hurriedly dialing 120. The ambulance quickly left the community, and I didn't notice that in a black car parked by the roadside, Ethan was staring at the ambulance with a complicated expression. Fortunately, after emergency treatment, the baby was out of danger. But this is only a temporary safety. The situation is very unstable, and the doctor said surgery must be performed as soon as possible. Hearing that the surgery would cost at least $500,000, I felt bitter inside and called Christopher. "Can you lend me $500,000 first?" On the other end of the line, Christopher chuckled coldly. "What, you want money again? The child is sick and needs surgery. Tonight, I want to try a new method." With my nails digging deeply into my palm, I said softly, "Okay." After hanging up, it wasn't long before $300,000 was credited to my bank account, according to the rules. I have to take good care of Christopher to receive the remaining $200,000. Thinking of his particular preferences, I felt a bit nervous. As I turned back to the ward, I unexpectedly bumped into Ethan, who was standing behind me, staring coldly. "Sophia, you really have become less likable than before. How do you always try to keep a man by using the child?" Back then, I loved him, and when he said he wanted to marry secretly, I agreed. He even forged our marriage certificate, and I was completely unaware at the time. He said he would make our relationship public once I got pregnant. In preparation for pregnancy, I worked hard to treat my polycystic ovary syndrome. I endured so much suffering not to keep him with the child, but to have a tangible result of our love. But I never expected that in his heart, 3 years of deep affection was merely a plan for revenge. I couldn't help but laugh until tears almost came out. While pretending nothing was wrong, I said, "Sorry to disappoint you. This time I successfully kept the man with a child." Ethan clenched his fists, furrowing his brows, looking a bit angry. But to my surprise, he actually held it in. "Leave Christopher and come with me. But I don't want to raise someone else's child. Let him handle that kid himself." I don't believe he would ignore his own son. I looked up at him, suddenly unable to smile. He saw Zio bow with his own eyes and still didn't recognize that it was his child. "Ethan, you can't be wishy-washy. I will never be an intruder for the same person twice." He clenched his fists, controlling his anger. "Are you really willing to compromise yourself to save Christopher's child? He is quite famous on the streets and often treats women poorly. He really seemed to want me to be his lover, but I still refused. He got angry because he felt I didn't know how to cherish it. And then he left. I steeled myself to tuck in Zio Bao's blanket, then turned and headed to Christopher's villa. At dawn, I left the villa with wounds all over my body, and finally received the remaining $200,000 on my phone. Back at the hospital, I gently stroked Zaya Abao's pale face, and tears quietly flowed down. "Mom, what's wrong?" Zaya Abao opened his eyes drowsily and reached out to touch my tear-streaked face. I quickly wiped away my tears and said, "It's nothing." "Mom is just very happy. The doctor said the baby can have surgery soon." Zaya Abao smiled weakly, with starlight flickering in his eyes. "If the surgery is successful, can I run like other kids?" I choked up and nodded. "Once you recover, Mom will take you to the amusement park." Zaya Abao fell asleep contentedly. I exhaustedly leaned back on the bench in the hallway to rest. But not long after, I heard a commotion. "It's her, that indifferent person." As soon as I heard the words "little third," I immediately became alert. I saw a lavishly dressed woman rushing over with several tall men and directly slapped me. "You really make me angry. How could you seduce my brother and keep him single?" I was hit so hard that I almost fell, and just as I was trying to steady myself, My hair was yanked violently. "I'm sorry, I can't fulfill that request." At the moment my clothes were torn, I felt a wave of despair and couldn't help but close my eyes. It feels like everything has returned to 5 years ago. In the hospital corridor, people were taking photos with their phones, pointing and whispering. But no one was willing to help. I begged them to spare Zaya Abao, at least not to let him see his mother being humiliated, but no one responded. That's only right. A mistress should face such consequences. She looks so innocent, but I didn't expect her to be so despicable. The scars and signs of ambiguity on my body are all too evident. Christopher looked at me coldly like Ethan used to, humiliating me to the fullest. The verbal arguments and conflicts seem like they will never stop. I curled up on the ground, trembling, repeatedly whispering apologies. Little Bao has been sent to the emergency room after fainting. For the first time, I felt scared and didn't dare to approach the door of the emergency room. I'm a bit worried that I will receive news I can't accept. Suddenly, a suit jacket was draped over my shoulders. I looked up and saw the complex emotions in Ethan's eyes. "Do you see it? This is the consequence of being a mistress. If you were with me, at least you wouldn't face such a situation." Just one glance, and I knew he was the one telling Christopher's sister the news. I really can't understand how he could say that. Ever since he had his assistant identify me as the mistress at the wedding, I've felt like a transparent person. The suit draped over me felt like the emperor's new clothes. I couldn't help but laugh. Although the situation was terrible, it was still better than being a mistress. At least he is single. Ethan didn't wait for me to beg or back down. His gaze looked very gloomy. "Sophia, if you don't learn to cherish what you have, you'll regret it one day." He was right. I have long regretted it. Regretted meeting him. Regretted falling in love with him. 3 days later, Zaya Abao finally found a suitable heart. And the surgical expenses were all raised. For the first time in 5 years, I felt relieved. But it wasn't long before I received a call from the doctor, telling me, "Miss Sophia, your father shows signs of waking up." I excitedly rushed into the ward, only to see Ethan standing in front of the hospital bed. Dad's eyes widened as he stared intensely at his phone screen, which was playing a video of me being publicly humiliated. "Dad, I can explain." I trembled as I rushed forward and smashed Ethan's phone. Dad struggled to raise his finger at me, his lips trembling. Just then, the monitor emitted a piercing alarm. "The patient's heartbeat has stopped. Come quickly to save him." I collapsed weakly on the ground, watching the doctors busily moving around. In the end, I only heard one sentence: "We did our best. Please accept our condolences." Fate felt like it was repeating itself, very similar to 5 years ago. As long as Ethan stood there, even without saying a word, I felt like I was falling from a high place to the bottom of a valley. All the deep-seated dissatisfaction and anger inside me suddenly erupted. I suddenly turned around, grabbed Ethan by the collar, and angrily asked him why he showed me that video. Ethan looked pale. "I just wanted to wake him up and give you a surprise." Another surprise. 5 years ago, he caused my mother's death. Isn't that enough of a surprise? I laughed loudly, tears streaming down my face uncontrollably. "Ethan, I can understand that you put me in a difficult position, but why did you have to target my mom and not spare my dad either?" What did I do wrong? He held me tightly, trembling, and said, "Sophia, I'm sorry. I didn't know it would turn out like this. I just wanted to make up for it after discovering that little Bao is my child and give you and the child a complete home." Ethan's words shocked me. I pushed him hard, but I couldn't break free. Instead, he held me even tighter, saying, "Sophia, give me a chance to do something for you and the child. To make up for everything. Do you think you have the right to say that?" Ethan turned pale immediately when I asked him that. "Little Bao is my child. I have the right to take care of him." It's really disgusting. I pushed him away with force. 5 years ago, you didn't even want to look at him, and now you're pretending to be close to him. Ethan's eyes were dim, and he took out a document from his suit pocket in frustration. That matching heart was found by me. I had a bad feeling in my heart. Staring tightly at that heart-matching report, my fingers trembling slightly. Sure enough, he leaned in closer, his tone gentle yet chilling. "Sophia, you don't want anything to happen to Zaya Obao, do you? Leave Christopher and marry me, or my heart will disappear immediately." I closed my eyes, and tears streamed down my face. In the end, I nodded and agreed. He smiled happily, wanting to hug me, but I dodged. Before the wedding, I must see the heart transplant surgery completed. Ethan was in a hurry to arrange Zaya Obao's surgery and our wedding. I went alone to handle my father's funeral affairs. Just as I walked out of the hospital, Christopher suddenly ran out from somewhere and pulled me into a car. He said, "Sophia, you're really bold. Actually getting so close to Ethan without my knowledge." I told him expressionlessly, "Christopher, what we had is already over." He laughed contemptuously. "Over? You just took 500,000 from me, and you think it can end so simply? Don't forget, I have those secret photos and videos of you." "I'm sorry, I can't fulfill that request. I feel like a living person without a soul, just struggling to do what I need to do, desperately trying to make up for my mistakes." Back in the hospital room, Ethan looks at me with a complicated expression. "Did he ask you? Didn't you say you wanted to break up with him? Have you really fallen in love with this much older man over the past 5 years?" I feel cold all over, unable to say a word. Ethan grips my chin tightly, forcing me to look up at him. He said, "Sophia, don't test my patience. Give me some time to handle this." In the dead of night, I stand in front of Christopher's villa, shivering uncontrollably. As soon as the door opened, he pulled me inside and roughly set me down on the sofa. "Do you think you're so impressive? You actually made me wait this long." I try to suppress my inner anxiety and discomfort, doing my best to please him. "Christopher, our deal is over. I will pay you back slowly. But what makes you think you can repay it?" Christopher leaned closer to me, his fingers gripping my neck tightly, and said, "Sophia, do you really think Ethan can protect you?" I felt like I couldn't breathe, and shadows began to appear before my eyes. Suddenly, the door was kicked open, and Ethan and some of his men rushed in. Christopher recognized them and casually said, "Ethan, breaking into someone else's home isn't a good idea, is it? Let her go." Christopher slowly pulled up his pants and shrugged his shoulders, saying, "What, Ethan likes this kind of person too." In the next moment, Ethan punched him in the face. Christopher staggered back, blood dripping from his mouth, but he laughed even more arrogantly, saying, "Ethan, do you think reporting to my sister will let you take my woman away?" But he alone couldn't stop Ethan from taking me away, and in anger, he smashed the red wine on the table into pieces. Then he turned to Sophia and said, "After raising a dog for 5 years, are you so easily manipulated by others? Have you forgotten so quickly how you ended up in this situation? How could I possibly forget?" "I can't forget either. The nightmares in the middle of the night always remind me of those humiliations. For me, those places are no different from a wolf's den and a tiger's lair." Ethan saw me trembling all over, barely able to stand, so he picked me up and whispered to comfort me, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." I closed my eyes and tears streamed down silently. Sigh, all the nightmares, aren't they all brought by him? In the blink of an eye, it was the day of the surgery. I stood outside the ward, my mind in a chaotic mess. Ethan handed me a cup of hot coffee, saying, "Don't worry, the lead surgeon is an expert I brought in from abroad." I didn't take the coffee. I just kept staring at the operating room door and said seriously, "If the surgery fails, I will definitely not spare you. Zaya Abao is my only spiritual support for living. If anything happens to him, I really can't bear it." Ethan grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to look at him. He said, "Sophia, the past is the past. You hate me this much, a finality sounds good. He avenged King Mei and her mother. But I can never escape this abyss, destined to remain in this predicament. What do you think?" Ethan had some self-awareness, saying nothing more, just quietly standing next to me. The phone suddenly vibrated. It was a message from Christopher, saying, "Don't think you can get rid of me." Then, a series of very embarrassing photos popped up one after another. My fingers were shaking so much that I almost dropped my phone. Ethan noticed and furrowed his brows, asking me what was wrong. I quickly locked the screen. pretending to be calm. But he snatched my phone and unlocked it using my mom's birthday, which was also the day we got married, revealing all the photos. Christopher, though he gritted his teeth, they couldn't help but clack together. I'll handle this. You just focus on waiting for Zaya Abau's surgery. It had already been 5 hours. And the surgical lights were still on. I curled up on the bench, desperately trying to feel a bit safer. Ethan sat across from me, keeping a close eye on me. Were you also waiting for me to turn back then? He suddenly asked, his eyes revealing a depth of emotion I couldn't understand, but I could only shake my head in denial. For Zaya Abau's sake, I held back all the words I wanted to refute. How could I possibly wait for someone who brought disaster to my whole family? The facts have proven that whenever he comes near me, it brings me misfortune. Now, all I hope is that heaven can bless me after losing everything. May the surgery for Zaya Abau be successful. When this wish was fulfilled, my legs went weak, and I almost knelt down, but Ethan caught me. The child is temporarily stable, but needs to be observed for 48 hours. I thanked the doctor with red eyes. The doctor looked at Ethan, as if he wanted to say something, but didn't. Ethan interrupted him and directly said that the subsequent treatment costs would be at the highest standard. After the doctor left, I shook off his hand and casually said thank you. On the 3rd day after the surgery, Zaya Abau finally came out of danger. I dozed off by the bedside and was suddenly awakened by a harsh ringing sound. Christopher sent a video call. I hesitated for a moment and walked to the hallway to answer it. On the screen, he was shaking a stack of documents, asking me to guess what they were. Christopher has always been crazy. Every time we were together, he would record those humiliating videos of me to watch during his free time. I dare not face those shameful memories. Trembling as I ask him, "What do you want to let me go?" 5 years, a full 5 years of torment and humiliation. Is that not enough for him to let go? He understood the plea in my eyes, revealing a sinister smile, saying to meet at the old place at 10 p.m. tonight. Otherwise, these remarkable things will be posted on the dark web. And I'll send them to your mother to see if she will jump in anger, and that's when the video will end. A cold voice suddenly came from behind. Do you want to meet him? When I turned around, I found Ethan standing there, his gaze terrifying. He asked, "Sophia, have you fallen in love with him? What makes me worse than him? Why do you like anyone but him? Especially falling for this old madman Christopher. He thinks I am still the person willing to casually satisfy his demands. But he seems to have forgotten that it was he who made me lose the courage and self-esteem to love. For the past 5 years, I have just been barely surviving." Fatigue made me unconsciously whisper that he was going to burn all the evidence for my mother. Ethan hurriedly left and handed me a hard drive that night. Now, can you safely follow me? The hard drive contains the information that Christopher used to threaten me. What I don't understand even more is why Ethan insists on marrying me. Knowing that I've been Christopher's lover for 5 years, does he want to use this hard drive to push me back into the abyss? I felt a tightness in my throat. Wanting to retrieve the hard drive, but lacking the courage, unsure if he had another backup, like Christopher, to control me. The treatment costs for Zaya Abau are a significant expense. And Ethan's recent behavior at least shows he still cares about this son. I tried hard to shake off the feeling of persecution and quietly said, "I will keep my promise and marry you." I don't know what method Ethan used, but Christopher was sent to prison. He hired the best lawyer and took me to court to see Christopher stand trial. In just half a month, Christopher looked much older. His eyes were filled with mockery and sadness. "Sophia, those who betray me will not have a good outcome. Just like your mother." His words were very hurtful. Ethan raised his hand to cover my ears, but he couldn't block out Christopher's sharp criticism ringing in my ears. After leaving the courthouse, he was even more protective of me, not allowing anyone to treat me poorly. He loudly told everyone that if anyone dares to bully my wife again, they should think carefully about the consequences. Wife, after being with him for 3 years, I ended up with the reputation of being a mistress for 5 years. A title I once longed for, but now it terrifies me. I really don't understand, so I asked him in the car, "Why did you marry me? Didn't you and Emma agree to get a divorce in a month?" Marrying her was just an act of revenge. The car fell silent in an instant. We all know that he married Emma to get back at Olivia and her daughter. I looked out the window. My heart a tangled mess. It wasn't until the car stopped in front of the Civil Affairs Bureau that Ethan spoke again. "Sophia, I went too far with what happened before. I later found out the truth about Olivia's fall, but I never dared to come find you. For the past 5 years, I've been like a frightened little bird. Avoiding you. You have no idea how I managed to get through those nights. Back then, it really wasn't your mother's fault." The sunlight streamed through the window onto his red-rimmed eyes. His voice was hoarse, and after a moment of silence, he said, "I misjudged someone, which led to our tragedy. For the past 5 years, I've been regretting it. Feeling very guilty inside. Thank you, Sophia, for giving me this opportunity to make up for the past." He gently opened the car door for me, invited me to get out, and asked me to join him in realizing the romance we once couldn't complete. But deep down, I felt nothing at all. I wanted to ask him if he knew how I spent those nights. But in the end, I chose silence and walked into the Civil Affairs Bureau with him. This time, the steel seal is real, and the documents are also genuine. The only thing missing is love. Ethan is preparing for the wedding at an incredible speed. He rented the entire Rose Manor, airlifted 100,000 fresh roses from France, and even personally reviewed the guest list. "Sophia, what kind of wedding dress do you like?" He excitedly showed me the design sketches on his tablet. His eyes full of anticipation, just like a boy in love. I randomly pointed to a dress and said, "Let's go with this one." He frowned and said, "Didn't you used to love the mermaid style the most?" I was a bit taken aback, surprised that he remembered this. But that Sophia, who could be happy all day over a fishtail dress, has long been gone since her wedding 5 years ago. Now she has no interest in these things. Ethan's gaze darkened, but he still smiled and nodded, "All right, I'll listen to you," on the night before the wedding. He took the little one to try on a small suit. The little one happily called out, "Daddy." After spending some time together, the little one had come to like this person who dotes on both of us. Excitedly, the little one called out to him, his face full of anticipation, "Daddy, can I be the flower boy tomorrow?" Ethan's eyes immediately turned red as he picked up the little one and said, "Of course, my darling." Seeing them embrace so tightly made my heart feel a bit sour. If that incident hadn't happened 5 years ago, how happy we would be now. Late at night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep, so I got up to check on the child in the small room. As I pushed open the door, I saw Ethan kneeling by the child's bed, gently stroking his face. In the moonlight, I noticed his face was wet, as if he had been crying. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Daddy came back late. It's all Daddy's fault for making you and Mommy suffer so much." Little Bao woke up at some point, his face full of tears, tightly hugging Ethan and calling out for Dad. At that moment, I almost softened. But in the next second, memories of my mother collapsing, my father's disappointed gaze, and the ruthless insults online, along with the constant updates from the doctors about the illness, flooded my mind. I gently closed the door and returned to my room. On the day of the wedding, the manor looked beautifully like a fairy tale. I stood in front of the mirror in a gorgeous wedding dress, but felt a bit unfamiliar. "Mom, you look so beautiful today." Little Bao ran in wearing a little suit, his face flushed, smiling happily, completely different from the shyness he showed in front of Christopher. I crouched down to hug him, but felt that his whole body was warm. "Little Bao, do you feel unwell?" He frowned slightly, covering his chest and shaking his head. I knew he must be feeling unwell, afraid that I was trembling all over. Seeing that Little Bao and I didn't look well, Ethan shouted loudly, "Doctor, quick. Call the doctor." Before Ethan's private doctor arrived, Xiao Bao suddenly convulsed in my arms, his face turned pale. The wedding scene turned chaotic. Ethan rushed in and picked up Xiao Bao, and after emergency treatment, everyone quickly drove to the hospital. The doctor said Xiao Bao was experiencing an acute rejection reaction and needed surgery immediately. His voice sounded like it came from a distant place. I held Ethan's hand tightly, fell to the ground, and pleaded with the doctors, please save him. The lights in the operating room turned on and off. When the doctor shook his head and came out, I felt like I was falling apart, and Ethan held me tightly, both of us swaying together. How could this happen? I broke free from Ethan's embrace and rushed into the operating room. The Xiao Bao who once called me Mom lay on the hospital bed, pale, unable to open his eyes again. I collapsed beside Xiao Bao, only wanting to say, baby, please wake up, Mommy is here. I held Xiao Bao tightly, but no matter how hard I tried, his small body slowly grew colder. Ethan was holding me beside him, already crying sadly. Sophia, don't do this. I turned around and slapped him, angrily saying, get lost. It's all your fault. If it weren't for you wanting to have a wedding, Xiao Bao wouldn't. Before I could finish, I felt a darkness in front of me and fainted. When I woke up, I found myself lying in a hospital bed. Am I awake? Ethan walked in, holding a bowl of porridge, and said to me, eat something. I looked out the window and realized it was already late. How long have I been unconscious? 3 days. He sat by the bed, wanting to feed me. At that moment, I noticed that his eyes were bloodshot and there was a stubble on his chin. Where is Xiao Bao? It's already arranged. Once you're feeling better, we'll go send him off together. Ethan, let's get a divorce. The truth is, I'm always unhappy being with him. In fact, it's the person I love who becomes unhappy. This is heaven's punishment for me loving him. Ethan's hand shook, spilling the porridge on the blanket. How terrible. He put down the bowl, his gaze suddenly becoming terrifying, and said, you can't go anywhere. At that time, I didn't understand what that terrifying emotion in his eyes meant. It wasn't until after I was discharged from the hospital and completed the funeral for Xiao Bao that he locked me in the villa on the outskirts. The decor in the house was completely to my liking. On the wall hung our wedding photo from 5 years ago, making it seem like the past 5 years were just a nightmare I endured. Although Ethan had put away all of Xiao Bao's photos, there were still no traces of Xiao Bao in the house. But on me, the scars left by Christopher clearly reminded me that these 5 years were indeed a terrifying dream. Ethan cautiously said to me, Sophia, from now on this will be our home and we can start anew. I looked at the electric fence set up in the villa's yard and coldly interrupted him, asking, so, are you going to imprison me? I just don't want to lose you. He grabbed my shoulders, desperately saying, Sophia, Xiao Bao is gone, but we can still have other children. Please give me another chance. It turns out that in his heart, Xiao Bao's significance was not as heavy as I had imagined. He goes to great lengths to cook for me every day, trying every means to make me happy and constantly giving me high-end gifts, yet I have never responded to him or shown any gratitude. Ethan, with red eyes and a sense of grievance, asked me, Sophia, what should I do for you to forgive me? The dead have already left, and we who are alive must continue to live. There is no need to remain immersed in the past. But wasn't he the first one to want to reminisce about the past and seek revenge for the mother and daughter? He has finally found a way to channel his hatred and feels relieved. Yet now he wants me to let go of the past and start anew with him. It's truly laughable and ironic, unless time can turn back and bring my parents and child back to life. His face suddenly turned very pale. In the days that followed, Ethan became even kinder to me, but at the same time he controlled me more strongly. He fired all the servants and personally took care of my life, even self-studying psychology to exert a form of mental control over me. But he does not know that those humiliations and sufferings have long been etched in my heart and cannot be easily erased. Every night, he secretly kneels in the basement, confessing in front of Xiao Bao's memorial photo. But no matter what he did, my response was always silence. He started to go crazy, disregarding my feelings and forcing me to cater to him. Sophia, you have pleased Christopher, who makes you feel humiliated for a full 5 years. Why can't you give me a little sympathy? I chose not to listen, like a voiceless person. He grew angrier and his gaze on me became more intense. I really couldn't endure this kind of life anymore. Until one day, while he was away, I smashed the bathroom mirror and used the shards to cut my throat. "Let me go." I looked at Ethan, who rushed in and said coldly, "Otherwise, I will really die in front of you." His expression went from shock to anger, and finally to despair. "Do you really hate me that much?" "Yes, even if I love you." "Your love makes me feel sick." Ethan took a step back, as if he had lost all his strength. I was taken to the hospital to treat my wounds, and he took care of me carefully until I was discharged. He handed me a card and said, "You can leave if you want, but I will not agree to a divorce. No matter what, you will always be my wife." I didn't expect him to let go so easily. I still watched him with some wariness. "Don't worry, I won't block your way anymore." I didn't take his card. I left the hospital and headed straight to the airport. The driver suddenly asked me if I knew the car behind us. I turned back and saw Ethan's car slowly following us. I told the driver to hurry, and he started to speed up. When we arrived at the airport, it was pouring rain outside. He immediately jumped out of the car to shield me with his suit, getting completely soaked himself. "I really don't want you to leave, Sophia. Ethan, please, can you not show up in front of me again?" "Fine." He stood quietly in the rain, watching me enter the airport. I couldn't help but cry as the plane took off. For my parents, for the child who passed away too soon, and for the part of me that once loved Ethan. A month later, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Christopher's lawyer. In fact, he had been seriously ill for a long time before coming back to find me. The doctor told him he only had a 30% chance of recovery. He didn't want to leave with regrets, so he came back to confess his past to me. The lawyer told me that after I left, Ethan stopped his treatment and completely gave up hope. The cancer quickly spread, and he passed away in pain, leaving all his assets to me. He also left me a thick handwritten confession. Ethan arranged his affairs well. All I had to do was go back and sign to inherit his estate. However, I didn't want that confession, so I burned it directly. I burned everything from the past along with it.